Good morning. I want to start with a simple question. If the building you manage could sit down across the table from you today and have a conversation with you, what would it tell you? Would it tell you that everything's fine? Would it tell you that the chiller you've been worried about actually has another 5 years of life left in it? Would it tell you that the rooftop unit everybody thinks needs replacing doesn't need replacing at all? Or would it tell you it's been trying to warn you about something for the last 6 months, but nobody has been listening? See, I've spent almost 4 decades working around buildings. I've been an engineer, a contractor, a technology provider, and I've worked with technicians, facility managers, property managers, executives, and building owners. And for most of my career, I believed our biggest challenge was technology. I don't believe that anymore. I believe one of our biggest problems in this industry is something much simpler. Buildings have amnesia. And ironically, the buildings themselves aren't the ones forgetting. We are. Think about your car for a moment. A modern automobile is incredibly complicated. Thousands of components, sensors everywhere, computers communicating with computers. And yet, when something goes wrong, a technician can simply plug a diagnostic computer into the car and immediately begin to understand what's happening. Why? Because a computer knows what that car is supposed to be. See, Ford knows how a Bronco was built. Toyota knows how a Camry was built. Porsche knows how a 911 was built. There's a blueprint. There's an operating parameter. There are fault codes. There's a known baseline. The diagnostic computer isn't magically intelligent. It has context. Now think about the building you manage. When that building was constructed, it also had a blueprint. It had drawings. It had specifications, sequences of operation, equipment schedules, engineering assumptions, and an original design intent. But then something happened. A pump failed. Someone replaced it. A tenant remodeled the floor. An engineer changed the sequence. Technicians changed set points. Someone bypassed a sensor because it was causing problems. A valve stopped working. A new chiller was installed. Another contractor came in, then another. Facility manager retired, a chief engineer left, the service contractor changed. And 10 or 15 years later, that building standing in front of you may look like the building in the original drawings, but operationally, it's totally complete organism. It's become a prototype, a one-off. There isn't another building exactly like that in the world. So here's a question I ask. How can artificial intelligence diagnose that building if we haven't first taught it what the building actually is? Our industry is obsessed with data right now. Sensors, IoT, dashboards, analytics, artificial intelligence. Everybody wants more data. But after almost 40 years in this industry, I've come to realize and believe something different. We don't have a data problem. We have a context problem. And underneath that context problem is an even bigger problem: memory. Let me give you an example. Imagine that you're a facility manager of a 20-year-old building. There's a chiller in the central plant. You know its age, manufacturer. You probably even know the model number. You might even know the operating hours, but do you really know its story? Has a compressor been rebuilt? How many tubes have been plugged? What has happened to its approach temperature over the last 5 years? Has the condenser water changed? Has the building load changed? Why did somebody change that sequence 7 years ago? Was that modification intentional or was it temporary? Was that ever put back? Someone probably knew. The problem is that person may not be there any longer. And when that person walked out the door, part of the building's intelligence walked out with them. The building developed amnesia. The most valuable person in any facility, because every facility has one, is the guy who's been there for 25 years, maybe 30. You walk into the mechanical room with him and say, hey, why does that pump run like that? And he says, oh, that's because 12 years ago, we had a problem with the differential pressure. Charlie changed it. There was another problem with the sequence. So we changed it because the third floor was having a renovation and it slowly changed. None of that is in a drawing. None of it is in the BAS. None of it is in a maintenance ticket. It's in his head. That person isn't just an employee. He's carrying part of the building's memory with him. Now imagine he retires Friday. So what happens Monday morning? The equipment is still there. The BAS is still there. Work orders are still there. The drawings are sitting in some cabinet somewhere. But something incredibly valuable disappeared. Context. And without context, data can be dangerously misleading. This is why our industry spends so much money treating symptoms. Something breaks, we repair it. It breaks again, we repair it again. And eventually somebody says, hey, let's just replace it, we're spending too much money. But very few people stop and ask, why did it fail? And more importantly, what else in the building is contributing to the failure? See, buildings are systems within systems. A chiller doesn't operate independently, neither does an air handler, a pump, or a rooftop unit. They're all interacting with each other. Loads, controls, weather, occupancy, maintenance practices, and each other. Our industry often manages them as individual pieces of equipment. We service them individually. That's like going to a doctor with high blood pressure and asking the doctor, oh, is 150/90 bad? What does he do? Well, here's a pill. What if the blood pressure isn't the disease? What if the body, what's it trying to tell you? Right? Same thing. What is it stress, dehydration, medication, diet, kidney function? Is it sleep? Or is it something else that's causing that number to be what it is? The reading is just information. The history gives it meaning. Buildings work exactly the same way. This realization changed the way I think about facilities because buildings are not silent. They've been talking to us this entire time. Every failure says something, every temperature says something, every work order says something, and every compressor replacement says something. The energy bill says something, and every technician who walks into that building learns something. The problem, those conversations are fragmented. One lives in the BAS, one lives in the computer maintenance management system, an invoice, a PDF, an email, or in someone's head. And some of the most important information in that entire building is gone. The problem isn't that the building doesn't have a voice. The problem is that we haven't given it memory. And I've come to think about it in two parts, DNA and memory. The DNA is what the building is. What equipment does it have? How is it designed? How are the systems connected? What each piece is supposed to do? What are the sequences? What are their capacities? What spaces does it serve? What's the purpose? That's the building's DNA. Then comes the memory, as important. Everything that happens from that point forward, the maintenance, the repair, failures, changes, inspections, renovations, replacement, technician observations, its energy performance, its operating behavior, capital project, that becomes the building's memory. And when you combine that DNA with the memory, something powerful happens. We create what I call operational intelligence. Now we're no longer looking at a temperature reading, we're looking at the temperature reading in context. We're no longer asking, is that chiller old? We're asking, given this particular chiller's history, its operating conditions, its maintenance, its performance, the role that it has within the building, what should we do with it? That's a completely different question. And this is where artificial intelligence becomes very incredibly powerful. Everybody's talking about AI these days, and they think it's a magic bullet, it's a genie in a bottle. But AI without context is just a very intelligent stranger walking into your mechanical room. Imagine hiring the smartest engineer in the world. He walks into your building tomorrow morning. You point to that chiller and say, should I replace it? Now, what should his first answer be? Well, hopefully it's not a yes or no. He tells you, I don't know. I don't have enough information yet. Because intelligence without context isn't operational intelligence. Imagine that same engineer. He knows your building's DNA and its memory. He knows the equipment, the history, the failures, your repairs, operating behavior, costs, all the modifications, the relationship between the systems. And now you ask him the same question. Should I replace that chiller? Now we can have a meaningful conversation. That's where I believe we're going. Not artificial intelligence replacing facility managers, something much more powerful. Artificial intelligence giving facility managers access to accumulated memory of their building. And I want to make something clear. I don't believe technology makes a facility manager less important. I believe it makes them more important because your job changes. You stop being the person that's constantly chasing failures. You stop spending your day reacting to whichever piece of equipment is screaming the loudest. And you become that person who understands what that building is telling you. Your role moves from reactive maintenance to decision making. It moves from what broke to why is this happening? From how quickly can I repair it to how do I keep this from happening again? And eventually, what is this building trying to tell us before something breaks? That's a very different facility management profession. So imagine something like this. You arrive at your facility Monday morning. Instead of opening 6 systems, instead of looking through hundreds of alarms, searching old work orders, instead of calling your technician who's been there over the weekend and knows the building for over 20 years, you simply ask your building, what happened this weekend? And it tells you. Cooling demand was normal. Chiller 2 consumed 11% more energy than expected. Condenser approach has been deteriorating over the last 6 weeks. That same condition occurred 14 months ago. And at the time, the condenser tubes were cleaned and the performance returned back to normal. I recommend inspecting the condenser before considering any equipment replacement. Think about that. That's not science fiction. Most of that information required to answer that question exists already. What's missing is the memory and the context connecting it all together. So I want to leave you with a challenge. When you go back to your building, don't just look at the equipment. Ask yourself, what does my building know about my organization that we are about to forget? What happens when your best technician retires? What happens when you change contractors? What happens when you leave? What happens when the next facility manager walks through that door? Does he inherit 30 years of knowledge? Or does he inherit a set of keys, some passwords, and a mechanical room? Because if the knowledge disappears every time people change, we aren't really managing buildings. We're constantly rediscovering them, and that's incredibly expensive. I spent almost 4 decades listening to buildings, and I've learned something. Buildings are constantly telling us what they need. They tell us through those temperatures, pressures, failures, maintenance, repairs, comfort complaints, and through the people who have cared for them. Our responsibility now is to stop allowing those conversations to disappear. Capture the building's DNA. Preserve its memory. Give technology the content it needs. Then, and only then, use artificial intelligence to help us understand that building and what it's trying to tell us all along. Because every building has a history. Every building has a memory. And every building has a voice. The question is, are we listening? Thank you.